The desert wind blew softly across the golden sands, whispering secrets of a time long buried. Far beyond the reach of the Nile's green embrace, silence ruled the land, ancient, patient, eternal. In the year 3100 BCE, or so the sleepy scribes might say, Egypt was born, not in a cry, but in a quiet fusion of chaos and order. Upper and Lower Egypt, two lands so different in temperament, were united by a man who wore a white crown on top of a red one, the very first pharaoh, Narmer, or maybe Menes, or maybe someone else entirely. The past doesn't like being pinned down. It slips away like sand between fingers. And so begins the story. Not of gods, but of god-kings. Not of glory, but of burdens. The disturbing, exhausting, sleepless life of the pharaohs. You would think being born a pharaoh meant golden cradles and lullabies sung by the priesthood, right? Not quite. The pharaoh, from the moment of birth, was weighed down by the invisible crown of Ma'at, the divine order of the universe. Even in his swaddling cloth, the child king was watched, judged, and prepared. Nurses did not smile much. Priests chanted protective spells over his cradle, worried that demons would slip into his dreams. One of the royal nurses, a pale, veiled woman named Neket, was said to never sleep, claiming she could hear whispers in the walls. Others laughed at her, until the baby started speaking in his sleep, naming stars that hadn't yet risen. They took that as a sign. Everything was a sign in ancient Egypt. Even the pharaoh's first sneeze could be read as an omen. As a toddler, the pharaoh was bathed not in water, but in sacred milk mixed with lotus and obsidian dust. He was taught to speak only after he could recite the names of the gods. His toys were carved from cedar and ivory, but he was never allowed to play without being observed. Behind screens, scribes watched his hands. Did he favor the left or right? Did he grasp the lion figurine or the crocodile? When he laughed, the priesthood debated what it meant. When he cried, they fasted. The royal food taster, a man named Sefu, began each morning by sniffing honeyed dates and sipping goat milk while scribes recorded the pharaoh's preferences. If the boy refused a dish more than 3 times, it was considered cursed and removed from the palace forever. A cat once brushed against the pharaoh's leg during a moonlit ceremony. It was a black cat. The next morning, the high priest declared the entire month to be inauspicious. All foreign ambassadors were told to wait. Nothing was simple, nothing was quiet, yet everything had to appear calm. Pharaohs were crowned more than once. The first coronation happened in the mind, in the temple, in secret. By the time he was 7, the young pharaoh had been ceremonially declared the son of Ra more than 12 times. Each time, he sat on a throne of cedar, while the priests placed golden amulets on his arms, each one colder than the last. In one ritual, he had to watch a goat be sacrificed and then draw a symbol in the sand using a bone from its leg. He cried that night, not from fear, but because the sand refused to hold the symbol. It scattered, blown by the breath of the gods, or so the priests told him. He began to hate the wind after that. His dreams turned strange. He saw pyramids that did not yet exist. He whispered names into the night, names no one had ever heard. A scribe wrote them down anyway. By his 12th year, the young king had forgotten what it meant to sleep deeply. Each night, the priests burned kaifi incense to summon protective spirits, but still the pharaoh tossed and murmured in his sleep. He spoke of rivers running backward, of jackals standing on 2 legs, of his heart being weighed by invisible hands. It was said that Thoth, god of wisdom, had written secrets in the boy's dreams, that his visions were messages for the nation. They built a chamber beneath the palace, cool and dark, lined with alabaster and lapis. There, the pharaoh would be taken during episodes of dream fever, when his body shook and his voice changed. He would wake up not knowing his own name, speaking.
One morning, a new priest arrived at the palace gates. He wore no color. He carried no offerings. His face was wrapped in linen, and no one had seen his eyes. Yet the guards let him pass without question, and the servants bowed without knowing why. He came to the pharaoh with a scroll made of stone. "Read only when the stars vanish," he said, then vanished himself. That night, the sky was overcast, no stars. The scroll cracked open like dry earth. Inside, there were no words, only a mirror polished from volcanic glass. The pharaoh looked into it and saw his face, older, wiser, alone. A day arrived when the sun did not rise. The birds did not call. The water did not move. Time halted. The palace ran on memory. Servants moved, but not forward. The pharaoh walked through a still world where his footsteps made no sound. In the hall of Maat, he found an hourglass turned on its side. No sand. A voice from nowhere and everywhere asked, "What would you do if eternity stopped ticking?" He answered nothing. And the day resumed, one breath at a time. Behind the palace, there was a garden where statues of past pharaohs stood in eternal bloom. Or so it was said. But these were no statues. They changed. Faces warped, eyes blinked. One wept stone tears. He wandered through them at dusk, feeling watched. One statue bore his own likeness, though aged by decades. Its mouth was open. Inside was a beetle carved of obsidian. He placed it in his palm. It beat like a tiny heart. Among the pharaoh's scribes was one who never looked up. His back hunched like a dying flower. He wrote in red ink, and his scrolls were never archived. The pharaoh asked to read one. It began with the words, "You are not the first." The rest detailed lives eerily similar to his own, dreams, rituals, fears, down to the hawk, Heka. He confronted the scribe, but the scribe had vanished. In his place was a reed pen, still wet with red. Every pharaoh prepared for death, but this one found his tomb while still alive. Behind a hidden panel in his bedchamber, a passage led to a burial chamber already completed. Painted walls, carved sarcophagus, jars of his organs already sealed, his name etched in gold. Only the face on the sarcophagus was smiling, and it did not look like him. He sealed the chamber, but he dreamed of it nightly. One evening, the Nile reversed. The priests wailed. The fishermen fled. Crops withered in confusion. The pharaoh stood on the palace balcony and watched. He did not blink. That night, he dreamed he was a reed drifting against the current, whispering his name into the mud. No one answered. In the morning, the river flowed normally again, but the fish had vanished. On the oldest monument in the palace courtyard, a cartouche appeared overnight. It was etched into the stone. His name, but altered. A third eye had been added to the glyph. He touched it. The stone was warm. The air behind him shimmered. A voice spoke. "You are not the first to bear this weight." He turned. No one stood there, only shadows. As his reign entered its twilight, the pharaoh noticed fewer people speaking his name. In prayers, they paused. In scrolls, they hesitated. Even he